Good morning all. Myself Amandeep Kaur, Assistant Professor in Education and Educational Management Department. I joined this institute on July 2014. The topic for this session is sampling. Sampling is an important piece of research because it have a significant impact on the finding and results of the research. For example, if a software quality engineer needs to know when and how to use different sampling techniques in order to effectively use the sampling during his product and project evaluation, during quality processes, or during auditing process, or in a product acceptance phase. So in that case, he need to know the various kind of the sampling technique and what are the various procedures used to calculate the result of its product acceptance rate in the market. It is not feasible for a software engineer to evaluate all the consequences related to the product in the market because there is a wide range of the customers that are using his or her product. In that case, when the customer base is very large and he want to pick or choose significant number of the customer to know the quality of the product he is distributed in the market, he need to know various kind of the sampling methods and sampling procedures. Next is in his auditing process. During auditing process, it is not feasible to use maximum time and cost spent on the resources or to spend time on the different, ask question to the different auditees or to check all the samples of his or her product during the quality process. In that case, he also need to signify number of the specific samples to be taken out from the product cycle and check the quality of those significant sample and make a journal statement about that product. In that case, an engineer need a sampling and various procedures and techniques used for pick those number of sample. So sampling is an important aspect. For example, another example is being a faculty in a technical institute. If you want to calculate the stress rate of the students near the final examination period, what would we do? I decided to take a survey. But how could I start my survey? Should I stand in a corner of the hall and ask all the students to take a survey sheet? Another option is, should I email to all the students present in the university to be the part of the survey? Is that survey or the result is to be significant? In that case, I need to know the method of sampling. So sampling is an important aspect so that we can feasibly identify number of the samples from a given lot by evaluating different, by applying different kind of a scientific technique, sampling techniques and procedure, we identify the significant response of the student or calculate the stress level near their examination period. So sampling is an essential part for our professional as well as real life perspective. Now let's start our session. In this session, we will cover define sampling, distinguish between different methods of the sampling, describe the factors that influence the appropriate sample design, develop an understanding about the different sampling method, understand the steps in developing a sampling plan, and discuss the relative advantages and disadvantages of various sampling techniques or methods. Now let's start the definition of the research. Research is what I am doing, but I don't know what I am doing. Or another simple statement of research is, the research is to see what everybody else has seen, but to know what everybody else has not think to do or not in their thought process. The process is considered as a research. Scientific research is basically deal with the boundary of knowledge and ignorance. There are certain things which need to be evaluated with the specific procedures and policies to be formulated. So the research by definition is a scientific research is a systematic, controlled, empirical and critical investigation of the natural phenomena guided by theory and hypothesis about the presumed relation among such phenomena. So research is an organized and systematic way to finding answer to the unknown questions. Now start with the sampling process. The different components of research that you might be aware: problem statement, research questions, purposes and benefit. What are the various theories to be followed for the research, assumptions and the background literature, variable and hypothesis, operational definitions and measurements, research design and methodology, instrumentation and sampling, how to select a particular sample for the study, data analysis, conclusion, interpretation and recommendation. Now what is sampling? Sampling is basically to identify a set of unit from the large population. When we are saying population, in journal context, population is taken as a population of a country. For example, Indian population, population of any specific nation or any specific region. But when we are using the term population in research methodology, population is basically represent the elements or the units from where the sample is to be taken for the study. So sampling is a process of selecting a number of the unit for a study, or the unit represent the sample as a whole. Means we are taking a lot of the unit from the large population, and that population or that sample represent the whole population. So this is known as a sampling process, and sample is a smaller but a representative unit of that larger population. Next is why we need sampling. Sampling make possible the study of large population. Population can be homogeneous or heterogeneous. Homogeneous population, that is having similar kind of characteristics, whereas heterogeneous population having different kind of characteristics. By identifying the significant number of the unit, it is possible to study the large population as a whole. Next is sampling is for economy. Sampling, when we identify a selected number of the unit from the large population, we save our resources in terms of cost factor. Sampling is for speed. Sampling is for speed means to evaluate the larger population take more time as compared to the smaller unit or the significant unit selected out of that large population. Sampling is for accuracy. If we are taking too small or too large size of the data for the research study, there are possibility that the result or findings are inaccurate. In case of the sampling, when significant units are to be identified, the accuracy is more as compared to the study of the large population. Sampling save the source of the data from being all consumed. When we are using different kind of resources for the study of the large population, it will take more time, more cost, more effort, but significant number of the unit will reduces all these parameters as well as increase the accuracy of the sample selected from that particular population. So this is about sampling and sample. Now there are some of the disadvantages of sampling also. First one is if we are collected a wrong sample, or the unit we identified from the large population are insignificant or unrepresentative of the large population. In that case, sampling is biased, non-representative and too small, and the conclusion drawn from that sample are not valid and not accurate. In research, respondent to a study must have a common characteristic which is the basis of the study. From the large population, when we are selecting a sample, we need to identify significant parameter of that population. Either we identify, for example, we identify sample on the basis of their age parameter, on the basis of their gender discrimination, on the basis of their, in case of student, on the basis of their scores. If we want to check the effectiveness of the new teaching methodology, on the basis of the score, if we want to calculate the result of that teaching methodology, the sample collected must be having some kind of a significant characteristic. So there is a common characteristic which is the basis of the sampling technique. If the population is very large, we need to divide the population into sections and subsection, which will consume number of the resources, and the sampling is become more complicated in that case. If the research does not know this, if the researcher does not know the various kind of the sampling techniques, what are the various probability, what are the non-probability technique, which technique is best efficient for which type of the sample, in that case the results are again not valid and accurate. So these are some of the disadvantages of the sampling technique. Next is, what are the characteristics of the ideal sample design? A sample design always represent a true picture of the large population to be studied for the research purpose. Sample design must be such that it result in minimum number of the sampling error by calculating the significant and non-significant parameter of the population. There is a less number of the error produced while finding the results of the study. Must be feasible in context of available funds for the research study. We need to calculate number of the data, analyze the data, and to find out the particular result for the data. So while sampling, the parameter to be considered are the funds available for the research project. Should have result which can be applied to the whole population. For example, if I identified the I divided the larger population on the basis of their age, on the basis of their gender, but my differentiation or subsection would must represent the population as a whole. What are the parameters which are similar or provide a true picture of that total population present for a study? Sample design should be able to prevent systematic bias. There should not be biasing while deciding the sample design. Next is, what is a good sample? A sample must be valid. A good sample is always valid. Validity depends on two considerations. First one is the accuracy and second one is the precision. When we said accuracy, the sample, for example, if a company want a market survey regarding their product, that is for example a soap bar, a company want to survey the sale of the product soap bar and he want to calculate the progressive sale related to that soap bar and want to cut the price of that soap bar. If the researcher survey a particular luxurious mall and take a survey regarding that product, that soap bar, and the people in that mall can easily afford the price of the soap bar, in that case the researcher is biased. He taken a survey of a particular lot, so the decision or the sample is biased. Survey taken by the researcher is a biased. The sample is a true representation of the population if he take the survey of middle and low class community and accordingly decide to cut down the price of that particular product. In that case, the sample or the method he chosen for the sampling must be a true picture of the population. Next is precision. Precision, the sample must be precised. Another example is, for example, in a dress company, in any dress company or in any dress mall, he logged the total phone numbers of the customer that are visiting that particular shop, and the owner of that shop want the satisfaction survey of the different customer. What the researcher did, he simply called all the numbers that he recorded earlier in his logbook and calculate the satisfaction rate of the customer. In that case, the sampling procedure is not precise. There are some number of customers who didn't give their phone number. He calculated the result on the basis of the reactions and responses given by those customers who recorded their phone number in his logbook. In that case, the sample does not precise the result of the research taken by that shopkeeper. So the sample must be precise, the result taken depending upon the method of the sampling technique used during the research project. So the good sample is always accurate and always a precise sample. Next is, what are the various sampling terms? The different sampling terms are, now let's do an exercise. He surveyed all technical school teachers to identify their problem in instructional process. Is he representing a population or a sample? In the statement, he surveyed, given as, he surveyed all the technical school teachers to identify their problems in instructional process. He's talking about a population or a sample? Population. Next is, the investigator is going to ask each and every potential voter to determine voting preferences. Is he talking about a population or a sample? May I request Chandigarh University?
Hello. Hello. It's population.
It's popular. Thank you very much, ma'am. Next statement is, it is a part of the total subject to which the researcher intend to journalize the result. It's talking about a sample. So this is the basic difference between a population and a sample. Sample is a significant unit taken out from the population, whereas population represent the whole statement of that research problem. So the different terms are population, what are the various elements, defined target population, sampling unit and the sampling frame. So the population is a large group from where the sample is to be drawn. The population is a complete set of the element which represent the population as a whole. The population always having some kind of common characteristics in it. These characteristics can be classified on the basis of the elements or the units. So the elements or the unit can be people, can be cases, or can be piece of the data. So the unit represent, example of people can be all university students. The unit represent number of the people. All kind of the students studying particular subject, again element is people. In case of the cases, recruitment agencies in Chandigarh, this is a case. Indian Parliament, example of a case unit. Countries that are member of the UNESCO, again the example of a case unit. And if we are talking about the piece of the data, customer transaction rate at Reliance Smart, test score between two time periods, for example from 7 to 11 September. This represent the piece of the data. So element can be piece, can be a people, or can be a organization or a product. Elements are divided into three different terms. For another example is, if the population we were interested is all 500 million users of the Facebook, the unit in this term is the users who are using Facebook. So unit represent a significant characteristics out of that population. Next is, what is target population? The target population is the population from which the sample is actually drawn, or the aggregation of the element is considered as a target population. For example, identify the group of the interest and its characteristics to which the finding of the study will be journalized are called the target population. For example, if I consider all the individuals above 35 years, I am talking about a population. if I said all the individuals above 35 years having specialization in VLSI design. Now I am talking about the target population for which I want my study to be taken out. This is the, with a special characteristic, it is considered as a target population. Total number of individuals present in a group are considered as a population, and unit represent the significant element present in that particular population. That can be people, that can be product or organization, or can be piece of the data. Next is, what is the sampling frame? Sampling frame is the complete or the correct picture of the members of the population. Sampling is the list of the element from which the actual sample is to be drawn. For example, sentencing a batch of material from the production for quality checking. For the quality checking of a particular product, if I specified a particular lot, means my sample is to be drawn from that particular lot. That is the sampling frame of my study. Appropriate sampling methods can be probability or non-probability samples methods. Size of the sample is number of the unit in a given sample. There is no fixed rule for identify the size of the sample for the study. There are different guidelines that can be used to identify the size of the sample for the various sampling techniques. Those guidelines are those guidelines can be if the population represent a heterogeneous characteristics, and the only the typical, normal or average is to be desired. In that case, the sample taken is a large sample. And if the population is having heterogeneous characteristics but with desired differences is known. When we know the desired differences and the population is heterogeneous, in that case the sample required is a small sample. Another guidelines are if the population is homogeneous. Homogeneous means having similar kind of the characteristics, and only the typical, again typical, normal and average is to be desired, the sample taken is smaller, opposite to heterogeneous case. And fourth case is if the population is having similar kind of the characteristics or homogeneous, and the difference, if different desired is known, in that case the sample taken is a large sample. And on the sample size, the total findings and results are depend upon the size of the sample chosen for the study. If we are taken too long or extensively large sample, there are possibility that the findings are incorrect. The size of the sample chosen must be appropriate depending upon the various guidelines or size or and characteristics of the population taken for that particular study. Now next is, how can we calculate the size of a sample? मैं बिना बोर्ड के कैसे लिखूंगी? Size of the sample is n is equal to capital N divided by the sample size is calculated with the help of a formula n. Small n is equal to capital N divided by 1 plus capital N E square. मैंने इसमें लिखा हो शायद, देखने दो पीपीटी में है इसमें। बहुत टाइम लग जाएगा ऐसे, कितनी सारी स्लाइड्स होंगी बता, देखती हूँ पीपीटी। हाँ, कितने करूंगी मैं? Written on the slide. N is equal to n plus 1 plus n e square, where e is the margin of the error. As much as possible, margin of the error should not be more than 5%. Ideally, it should be taken as a 3%. Where small n represent the sample size and capital N represent the population size.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Ma'am, what is the difference between this small e and capital E here?
Sir, this is shown in the slide. N is equal to capital N divided by 1 plus n e square. N is the population size. No. And
is there any difference between small e and capital E? You have used two different terms here.
Small e, sir, in the equation.
Yeah, small e in the equation, and in the description it is
This
capital E.
represent error only, sir.
Okay, it's same.
Same, yes. It
Okay,
represent error only.
thank you.
And error ideally it should be taken as a 3%. Next is if we want to calculate the sample proportion. The sample proportion is calculated as small n sample size divided by the size of the population. Sample size divided by the size of the population. If the population size is, write a statement, if the population size is 5,346, if the population size is 5,346 and margin of error taken as 3%, calculate the size of the sample. Calculate the size of the sample. Population size is 5346 and margin of error taken as 3%, calculate the size of the population. Simply put these terms in the equation given and calculate the size of the sample, that must be 920. And sample proportion 920 divided by the size of the population, that is 5346. Proportion will be कितना आएगा 17%. And the sampling size parameter, it depend upon the nature of the target population, purpose of the study, and kind of the analysis to be performed. When we want to decide an adequate sample size, we must consider three different parameters, that is accuracy and precision, homogeneous as well as heterogeneous characteristics of the population, and cost parameter. Cost in sampling refer to the expenditure of the money, total time consumed during sampling process, and effort required to obtain a sample from the data. These are the different parameters to be considered while selecting adequate size of the sample. And what are the various sampling constraints? The sampling constraints can be, क्या होंगे sampling constraints? कैलकुलेट कर लो सर, फॉर्मूला यही है n डिवाइडेड बाय कैपिटल N. हो सकता है मेरी कैलकुलेशन मिस्टेक हो. What are the various kind of the sampling technique constraints? This can be funds available to the researcher, can be funds available to the researcher mean budget for that particular research, time, and accessibility to the various sources. These are the different sampling constraints. Next is what are the various kind of sampling methods. The sampling methods are divided into two different classification. First one is the probability sampling and second one is non-probability sampling. Again, probability sampling is divided into, classified as simple random sampling, systematic random sampling, stratified random sampling, and cluster sampling. Now what is probability sampling? Probability sampling is also known as a random sampling process. In this, the sample is a proportion or a certain portion of the total population. Sample is selected from the population in a very systematic way, or there are equal chances of the every element in the population to being selected or become the part of the sample taken for the research study. By definition, a probability sampling scheme is one in which every unit in the population has a chance that is greater than 0 of being selected in the sample, and the probability can be accurately calculated. When every element in the population does have the equal chances of being selected, it is also known as equal probability of selection. design, and such design are also defined as or referred as self-weighing design, because all the sampled unit are given the same weight in a research study. So in nutshell, in probability sampling, every element or every unit present in a sample have the present in a population have a equal chances of being selected as a sample. This is known as probability sampling. And what are the various probability sampling is? More complex, it is time consuming and costly, and randomization is a specific characteristic which is to be considered while we are doing probability sampling rather than an assumption that is taken on the structure of the population. Means on what basis we are selecting the particular element or the particular unit in a sample. So randomization is a particular characteristic to be considered while doing probability sampling. So first classification is simple random sampling. This is the basic probability technique. It is also known as a lottery or a raffle sampling. In this sampling, every element of the population of inquiry means of study has an equal chance of being selected and included in the sample. This is done in the case where the population has similar set of characteristics or has no differentiated level, section or the classes. Example taken as conducting a survey to estimate the student's attitude toward a technical job with a sample drawn from the total number of the student, with each student having a chance of being selected. The statement represent all members of the population have essentially an equal opportunity or equal probability of being selected in the sample. This is considered as simple random sampling. The different steps followed for doing sampling is, first one is define the population, define the desired sample size, list all the members in a population, assign each of the individual on the list a consecutive number from 0 to the required number. For example, if my sample size is say 35, the coding done on a random table is 0, 1 or 0, 1 to 35. If my sample size is of 3 digits, say 585 is my sample size, the coding done is 0012 to 585 on a random table. Select an arbitrary number in the table of random numbers. Any number, close your eyes and pick any number. For the selected number, look at only appropriate number of the digit. If the sample taken is of 2 digit, the number selected from the random table must be of 2 digit. If the sample size is of 3 digit, the number selected from the random table should be of 3 digits. If the selected number correspond to the number assigned to an individual in the population, then the individual is in the sample. Repeat the step until the desired sample size is obtained. This is the random number table. Now in example, suppose that you are going to select 30 students at random from a population of 900 students. Select a sample using simple random probability technique. The total population size is of 900. The coding that is to be done is of 3 digits 0012 to 900. Now for example, from the random number table, if I pick the column 10 to 14 and row 15, the column 10 to 14 and row number 15, the digits taken by me, first digit taken by me is 844. Likewise, I choose the number. I need a sample of 30 students. I decided to move downward to the table and choose all the number, that is 448, 806, 828, 836, 843, 585. All the numbers are to be selected from the random table, as I want to pick the number according to that way only. So the numbers selected are from 844 up to 30 number. Now next step is the size of the population is up to 900. The size of the population up to 900. The sample size contain 844, 448, 806 and the number below 900. 957 is greater than 900, so I excluded that number. Then 916 is greater than the size of the population and this number is again excluded from the list. So this is the way we use random table and simple random technique. Now exercise question is, suppose we have a population size of 35 and we want to select a sample size of 5 by considering the random table and select the sample size by using simple random technique. In this case, the size of the population is up to 30 student and sample size taken is up to 5. Now calculate the selected number for the sample from sample random table. Is it visible to all of you? No? परमजीत जी स्क्रीन पे बड़ा नहीं हो सकता? नहीं? Chandigarh University. और मैं कनेक्टेड नहीं है क्या? मैं रिक्वेस्ट चंडीगढ़ यूनिवर्सिटी.
Hello.
Sir, is this table is clearly visible on your screen?
No, it is not visible. It's very small. It's not visible. Can it be zoomed?
I'm trying, sir. नहीं होगा ये. हैंग ही हो गया. बड़ी प्रॉब्लम है. मेरा सारा टॉपिक ही ऐसा है. करके देखो अगर होता है. Total size of population is 35 and sample size required is 5. 35 means you need to choose 2 digits from the table. Pick any number. For example, if I taken 15 to 19 column and row number 12. 15 to 19 column and row number 12. First number came as 57. I can choose number from the starting of the whole number or the last two digits. Starting two digits or last two digits. If I am taking number 57, 57 is greater than 35, so this number is excluded from the list. 79005 can be taken as a sample. The number less than 35 is to be taken, and the number taken must be sample size required is 5. 5 number is to be chosen from the. This is the method to use random. For example, some population sizes.
ਉਹ ਤਾਂ
Sample size required is
ਏਦਾਂ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਦਿਖਣਾ
For example, you are using column 15 to 19 and row taken as 37.
ਏਦਾਂ ਵੀ ਨਹੀਂ
Now
ਦਿਖਣਾ
you
ਚਾਹੀਦਾ
can choose either
ਉਹ ਫਟ ਰਹੇ ਨੇ ਫਿਕਸ
30 is population size. 35, the number is less than that, so this number is 7. 6 is not excluded, 89 excluded, 20 selected, 8 selected, total 400. This is the simple way of using simple matrix. If the population size is 25, sample size required is 1. Pick any number from 77, 15 and 90 and 77 is larger than 35, so this number is discarded. Next is 33 is the main large. 40 is 01 is taken as 28 is taken as sample as 16, up to 5 numbers had to choose from. If you're choosing last two digits for all the numbers you have taken for the sample, you have to choose only the last. And if you choose first two digits, then you have to choose only all the two digits. They create a subset of numbers and 2500 randomly assorted. This is a data table that is picking number of units. No, you can choose any random, any row, any column, any number. These are random number taken up either first two digits or last 20. If you're choosing first digit, number can be 12, 37,
Every item must be given the equal chance to come in the center from the operation. That is why it is called random.
So 0 is the starting number. 66 is more than the size of population. So this is also started
Bias नहीं हो सकते. कहीं से भी हो सकते.
Hello.
अगर bias हो गए तो वो conclusion invalid हो जाएगा.
Hello. Hello.
So you have to randomly select any.
सर 1 मिनट वेट कर लीजिए मैम.
Any. So you have to select 35 and sample size between 15 and 1. In this case, pick any number from the group. 22
Just
sample size
go to this line. But using इसमें
Either column wise or but in quantity.
Yes, Chandigarh University, is there any question, sir?
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Ma'am, what exactly we are trying to do with this table? And
Sir, in simple random technique, na, there is a journalized random number table. By
okay,
using that table, we have to select a sample.
okay,
I'll mail you that table, sir. After this
okay,
session, I'll mail you the table. I'll describe the total process again to you. For
okay.
example, if the sample size, sorry, if the population size is of 900 students, सर मैं पीपीटी शेयर करना. If the population size is of 900 students, means that digits in the population is up to 3 digit. We have to code the total random number table as 0012 to 900. From the random number table, I have to pick any number randomly, either column wise or row wise. For example, if I have pick column 10 to 14 from the random number table and row number 15 to start my sampling process, and my decision is to move downward to the page, means column wise. The first number to be selected is 844. The next number are 448, 806, 428 and so on. I have to discard the number that are higher than my population size. For example, if the number came 957, 957 is higher than the size of the population given in the statement. So I discard that number. So the total number of the samples are selected by using the random number table. Am I clear, sir? Another example is if the population size is up to 2 digits, say 35. The number chosen from the random number table is only first 2 digit of the selected number from the random table. This technique is considered as simple random probability technique.
Ma'am, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Suppose like whenever there are some elections in any of the state or countrywide, then
Yes, sir.
different surveys are shown. So
Yes.
what kind of sampling technique we use in that case? What
Sir,
kind
there
of
are
sampling
number.
procedure is used?
Sir, this simple random technique is only used when the population having similar kind of the characteristics and having less differences in it. In another sampling techniques that we are going to discuss, the answer of your question will be well defined.
Okay.
So the advantages of simple random technique is this is easy to understand, easy to apply, strategy require minimum knowledge of the population to be sampled. But in simple random technique, we have to code all the members of the population. So need name to all the population member may over represent or underestimate the sample member, and there is a difficulty in reached all the selected samples. So it's a time consuming and a costly process. The time and effort required is more. Next is systematic probability sampling technique. This is the modification of the simple random sampling technique. It is also known as a interval sampling, gap sampling, or quasi sampling. This technique is between probability and non-probability technique. In this, the researcher have to select every kth unit until the intended size of the sample is to be obtained. It's also called a gap interval technique because each selected unit have a particular gap or significant gap in them. This technique is used when the members of the population are arranged in some systematic or in a logical manner. Systematic random sampling is used when the population is arranged in a systematic or in a logical manner. For example, if the list of the student is arranged in a alphabetical manner, the researcher need to identify a kth unit from that particular list of the student. Steps to be followed: define the population, determine the desired sample size, obtain a list, preferably randomized, of the population, select every kth person, select some random place at the top of the population list, again according to your choice, choose any name from the list, and starting at that point, take every kth person name on the list until the desired sample size is to be reached. There is a no systematic rhythm to flow or list of the people. If the end of the list is reached before the desired sample size, then again go back to the top of the list. For example, the kth unit is to be calculated as population size divided by the sample size. For example, if the population size is of 64 and sample size I have taken is 8, the kth unit is 64 divided by 8, that is 8th unit. Means from the list I have to select every 8th person in a systematic way. In this example, consider the following list of the student and their achievement score in maths. By using systematic sampling technique, select a sample of 4 students to be representative of the class. So first calculate the sampling interval. The size of the population is up to, size of population is total number of students in the list. The total number of students in the list are 20. Size of the sample required is 4. So sampling interval is 20 divided by 4, that is 5. Means I have to select every 5th student from the list. Now randomly I select the name of the student from the list. For example, if I choose Mary Smith, the next student will be, if I randomly choose Mary Smith from the list, because my sampling interval is 5, the first student I have chosen from the list is Mary Smith, the next is Kathy Ray, next is Rex Tall, next is, these are the desired students for my sample. First, you have to calculate the sampling interval, that is to be calculated by population size divided by the sample size. The sampling interval came, then randomly pick any number from the list, because this sampling technique is used only when there is a systematic and logical setup of the data available with the researcher. After calculating the interval, I have to select number of the students from the list. This is known as systematic sampling technique. Next is, advantages are sample selection is more convenient, faster and economical. All member of the disadvantages are all members of the population do not have an equal chance of being selected, because I randomly select Mary Smith, next 5 students, next 5th student in the list I have selected. Probability and non-probability sampling. The kth person may be related to a periodical order in the population list, producing unrepresentativeness in the sample. Next is stratified random sampling technique. In this method, the population is divided and subdivided with homogeneous or similar characteristics. Population is heterogeneous in nature, it is divided into, if the population is heterogeneous in nature, divide the population into different number of group depending upon their similar characteristics. These subgroups are known as strata. Strata are homogeneous in characteristics. The process of selecting randomly samples from different strata of the population is used in the study. Vote, the question that is asked by the Chandigarh University, how could we select the voter for the election poll? This is to be done by stratified random sampling technique. Divide the population into similar set of characteristics and draw the sample according on the basis of their characteristic and select the sample from the defined list. Example is, a researcher is interested in predicting whether or not the local voters are likely to pass a periodic law in the society. This is to be done by the stratified sampling technique. It is impossible for the researcher to assign a number to the each potential voter as in case of the simple random technique. In case of the simple random technique, we code the total list of the members available in the population, but in stratified sampling we have to differentiate the population into different subgroups known as strata depending upon their similar characteristic. So voter natures are to be identified by stratified sampling technique. The stratified sampling technique can be done by two different ways. First one is the equal allocation and second one is the proportional allocation. Equal allocation means if there were 3 starters, so 1/3 of the samples should be selected from the each starter. For example, I have a large population. I divided the population into 3 different subgroups. For example, if I'm talking about the university students, university student is a large population of a heterogeneous nature. I divide the total university population on the basis of their age, on the basis of their previous qualification, on the basis of their social economic status. Means I divided the heterogeneous population into 3 different stratas. Now equal allocation means I have to select 1 unit from the each strata for my sample. Means equal number of members are to be selected from the each strata to gain a representative sample of the unit. But in case of proportional allocation, in select strata member in the sample proportional to the number of the members, the strata in the population. This is to be clarified with the help of example. Steps to be followed in a stratified sample is define the population, determine the desired sample size, identify variables and subgroups. Subgroups are stratas from which you want to guarantee appropriate representation either on proportional basis or on equal basis. Classify all members of the population as members of one of the identified strata. Randomly select using table of random number an appropriate number of the individual from the subgroup. Example is, the investigator knows that there are approximately 10,000 persons living in a X city who have elementary educational attainment, 8,000 have secondary educational attainment and 6,000 have college educational attainment. If the desired sample size is 500, then calculate the number of the members selected in each group. So the first step is define different stratas. There are 3 different stratas in the statement. First one is the person with elementary education, that is up to 10,000. Second strata is the person having secondary education, that is total members are 8,000. Third strata is college educators, that is 6,000. So there are 3 different stratas elementary education, secondary education and college education. First having population of 10,000, 8,000 and 6,000. So the total population is up to 24,000. Then proportion of number of the strata in each case. The size in each strata divided by the total population, the proportion came, that is 0.42, 0.33 and 0.25. Remember that sum of these proportion must be equal to 1, means 0.42 plus 0.33 plus 0.25 is equal to 1. Number of members selected from the each strata. The desired sample size is 500. Calculate the number of the member. So multiply sample size with proportion of number of strata. 500 multiplied by 0.42, that is 210 samples are selected from first strata, 165 from second and 120 from the third. Next is a call center company want to seek suggestion of their agent for a new market strategy for their new services. Suppose that a desired sample size is up to 500 and total number of the population is 5,000. Now divide the population depending upon their age parameter. For example, if the age under 30 year having 1,000 members, in between 30 to 45 year 3 to 50 and over 45 year 750, calculate the numbers of the members selected from each strata. So again there are 3 different stratas present in the statement. First strata is under age under 30 years having total members 1,000, 30 to 45 year,
And it will be selected from 1,000 member, 325 from one and 75 from.
yes. Again there are 3 different status that are 1,000, 3250 and 750. The total population is up to 5,000 and desired sample size is 500. 1,000 divided by 5,000 in first strata, the proportion is 0.2. In second, 3250 divided by 5,000, the proportion came 0.65. And over 45 years, 750 divided by 5,000, 0.15. Now add all the proportion. 0.2, 0.65, 0.15 is equal to 1. The number of the members selected 500 multiplied by 0.2, that is 100 members are selected. 500 into 0.65, 325 and in third strata 75. Now add all these members, the total sample size is 500. 100 plus 325 plus 75. The sample size came is 500. Chandigarh University, sir, is it clear?
Yes, it is clear.
Thank you very much, sir. The advantages of stratified random sampling is more precise sample, can be used for both proportion and stratification sampling. Sample represent the desired strata. Disadvantages are difficulty in reaching all the selected in the sample and researcher must have name of all the population. Next is the cluster sampling. Cluster sampling is also known as a area sampling or a multi-state sampling. In this case, it is possible for the researcher to sample area or cluster of the element first, then to sample the individual or elements from those clusters when the selection of the individual or the element is impractical or is too expensive. This is used when the population is of too big size and geographical area of the research is very large. For example, a few college students can be selected randomly and a relatively large number of students can be selected from the each college. Another example is a city block or a neighborhood is to be selected by using area maps from which the individuals are to be selected. From the city map, first you select the areas and from those particular areas select the number of the individuals as a sample for the study. The different steps to be followed in cluster sampling are: first is define the population, determine the desired sample size, identify and define the logical clusters, obtain or make a list of all the clusters in the population, estimate the average number of the population member per cluster, determine the number of the cluster needed by dividing the sample size by estimated size of the cluster, randomly select the needed number of the sample cluster from the list, include in the sample all population members in selected cluster. This method is very complex and expensive. Example is, for example, the population size is up to 5,000, sample size taken as 500, and the logical cluster, for example, if I want to select a survey of a particular branch of the company, so the logical cluster is the branch of the particular company. Say there are 50 branches all over the country of that particular company. The total number of the clusters are 50. If there are 50 branches all over the country, the total number of clusters are 50, and each branch having different number of the agents, and suppose there are 100 agents present per branch. So the number of the clusters needed are desired sample divided by the number of the agent. Desired sample is up to 500 and number of the agents are 100. So cluster needed are 5 clusters. So therefore we selected 5 branches randomly from the list and all the agents are selected from that branches for the particular survey. First identify the cluster or area and then pick the individual from those clusters. This is known as a cluster sampling. This is very efficient. Researchers do not need name of all the population member, reduce travel to the site and useful for the educational research. Fewer sampling point make it less like the sample is to be representative. Next is what is non-probability sampling. Any sampling method where some elements of population have no chance of selection. These are sometimes referred to as out of coverage or under covered, or where the probability of selection cannot be accurately calculated. The method is known as, means every element present in the target population have no equal chances of being selected for the sampling technique. It involves selection of the element based on the assumption regarding population of the interest which form the criteria for the selection. Because the selection of the element is non-random, non-probability sampling not allow the estimation of the sampling error. There are, example is, we visit every household in a given street and interview the first person to answer the door. In any household with more than one occupant, there is a non-probability sample because some people are more likely to answer the door and it's not practical to calculate these probabilities. This is considered as a non-probability sampling. The first technique to be covered under non-probability sampling is convenience sampling. Convenience sampling is also known as a accidental or opportunity sampling technique. In this sampling technique, the process is to picking out the people in most convenient and the fastest way to get their immediate response on a certain hot or controversial issue. So it's a non-representativeness of the target population because sample are selected according to the easiness or convenience of their availability. So this sample is considered as a convenience sampling technique. The advantages of this sampling is easy to use depending upon the convenient and accessibility of the data. And disadvantages are there must be systematic biases present in the sampling and it could not deliver the accurate result when the population is homogeneous. So this is convenience or accidental sampling process. Next is purposive sampling. It's a deliberate selection of the sample unit conformed to some predetermined criteria. This sampling technique is useful for selecting a sample in relation to some criteria which are considered important for a particular purpose. For example, a teacher selects a group of the student by an arbitrary method on the basis of the post-performance score in order to identify the effectiveness of a teaching methodology. Depending upon the past score of the student, the teacher pick number of the student from the list to calculate the effectiveness of the new teaching methodology. This is known as purposive sampling. Advantages are use of the best available knowledge of the researcher for selecting a sample for the research, and homogeneity in the subject is used in the sample. There is a better control of the various known significant variable and ease of checking data used in matching the small groups. There are number of the disadvantages. The sample can be biased or there is not equal chance of the respondent to be selected for the particular selection. The purposive sampling is again divided into two different classification. First one is the quota sampling and second one is the judgmental sampling. In quota sampling, this is the method that is frequently used in a marketing research area. The basic objective is to control the biases arising out of the non-probability method by stratification and by setting the quota of the each stream. The method is determine what the population look like in terms of the specific qualities. So first identify the significant characteristics of the population, create a quota based on those qualities and select the people from each quota for the sample. The process whereby the research gather data from the individual possessing identified. Example of quota sampling is, क्या example होगी quota sampling की? The sample selected on the basis of the similar characteristics of the population. For example, if I chosen quota on the basis of the age, on the basis of the social status in the society, the sample selected on the basis of the known characteristics identified the quota for the large number of the population, the sample is considered as a quota sampling. And last one is judgmental sampling. Based on the certain judgment, the researcher identify his sample, but the critical issue is how much can judgment be relied upon to arrive at typical sample. And advantages are reduced cost and time involved in acquiring the sample. And last one is the snowball sampling. Snowball sampling is done when the population is of small size. The researcher identify an individual and then individual identify his another member for the sample. So the downside of using a snowball sample is this is hardly representative of the population. The sample is selected on the basis of the response of a single individual selected by the researcher. This is all for the sampling.